No, I don't want to give it to you. Why do I have to?
Because my attorney said not to.
Why do I have to give it to you? This is evidence. She's under arrest. I have to go with it. I have to go.
Let me help you out.
No, I have to stay. Please don't do this. Don't stay. You need to grab the bags. Take the bags. Yeah. And you need to wait outside. Okay.
My husband's almost 80 years old. He can't
Yeah, I
come with
can't.
me.
Please, can I go? No, you can't join me there. Oh, don't do this, please.
Please.
Oh,
Someone's
God.
got to help him get home. This is terrible. You can't do this. This is insane.
Is that okay with you?
Please. You don't have to have the handcuffs on. She's not going anywhere. Please. Please.
You have anything in your pocket?
No, no.
Do you have anything of value in you?
No,
Plus you have a necklace on. You
Wanna
can
go?
take
My-
it.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, take it off. Yeah.
And the earrings.
And the earrings. There-
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record. Okay, how is everyone? Here we go. First day in Donna Adelson's trial. Opening statements, beautiful opening statements by Sarah Dugan for the prosecution. The minority in my audience thought Georgia Kappelman was going to do it. Myself, so congratulations to everyone who was in the minority, 49%. The majority, 51%, said Georgia Kappelman is going to do it. I was in the minority. Not unusual for me. I had the minority opinion that Sarah Dugan was going to do it. They were going to do it just like Charlie Adelson's trial. Beautiful opening, powerful opening by Sarah Dugan. What we found out, the jaw dropper, we found out about this investigation. So I'm talking about the jailhouse snitches. And what was reported was that Donna was offering something to elicit favorable testimony from at least two snitches are going to testify to it. One of those snitches who was offered something was Drina Bernhardt. I don't know if Patricia Bird was offered something or if she knows that someone was offered something. I would think that it would have to be to her directly. And of course, there's Mickey Esterwood, too, who I don't have a picture of handy. I showed a picture last night, I believe. So, but what we found out was a wowzer. So she's offering something, and I'll leave it for a second, for prison snitches to say that I was in jail with Katie McBanawa and that Katie McBanawa set up the Adelson family. And they even have a script written by Donna, a script. And I've talked about Donna's terrible dialogue before. It's so bad. It sounds like nothing that would come out of anyone's mouth. It's wooden. It's stiff. It sounds like Donna. She can't even be imaginative enough to imagine herself as a different person when she scripts these things. We'll go over her script, but what she was offering is the real wowzer. So she was offering these jailhouse snitches Veneers, full set of veneers, prescription drugs written by Harvey or someone else, not specified where she was going to get these prescription drugs, money, and property. I believe. Was money listed or is it just property? We'll listen and hear again. Property, I heard too. I'm not sure money was in there. I don't know if it was a goods to goods thing. Let me know if you heard money. I heard property, veneers, drugs. If they would testify for her, if they would perjure themselves, give false testimony. So I kept thinking, we'll work for veneers. You know, the sign, will work for food, will work for veneers. Listen, I'll give you some veneers. I'll have Harvey write you a prescription. And what makes it so sad and predatory and callous is that these are women who've gone in and out of Leon County Jail for substance issues or crimes that they probably wouldn't have done if they hadn't had a substance issue. And here Donna sees that and doesn't think, oh, I'm going to befriend this person, gets to know these women and thinks, oh, I hope they do well. No, Donna's thinking, how can I use this person in a vulnerable situation to my ends? And it's so emblematic of this crime. How can I use people who desperately need money? I have tons of money. I'll use poor people to do my bidding and get them to do something illegal so I don't have to face the consequences. So, but what was more striking than Sarah Dugan's fantastic opening, about as perfect as an opening as you can get. I have to listen again. If there were mistakes made, I didn't hear it on first listen. I will listen back again with all of you tonight. So I listened to some of it, but I didn't get it to listen all the way through from beginning to end. More striking than that was Donna Adelson's defense lawyer, Jackie Fulford. Jackie Fulford giving a disgusting opening statement, morally repellent opening statement, where she doesn't mean any disrespect, calling Dan Markel Danny, and talking about the horror of the crime as she actively represents Donna Adelson, his murderer, one of his murderers, conspirators, murderers, whatever you want to call it. Without Donna and her evil plans, he would still be alive. And here she's talking about the horror of the crime. She goes into great detail to describe every gruesome detail, the way Dan Markel put up his hands in a defensive posture before being shot in the head in his driveway. It is something else. I'm going to start with that so you get a flavor of how morally repulsive she is. Scary woman, dark, scary. Even defense lawyers, she stands out. Not that she's so different than other lawyers in her callousness, but that she has no false veneer in front of this. There's nothing hiding this. There's no public mask hiding how dark, cruel, callous, insensitive she is towards the victim of crimes. And you understand why she runs a funeral home, because she loves to be around people who are vulnerable and much like Donna, I think, take advantage of them. But she likes to get into also, how do I describe this? Get into the grief vampire, get into how they're feeling and really get into every horrible detail. I don't know if it makes her feel powerful or superior or better or Schadenfreude. I don't know. But it's very clear in her opening that this is a woman who likes to examine and exploit the suffering of others. So I'm going to start with that, Jackie Fulford, and then we're going to go back to Sarah's opening. I'm not going to play all of it because then after that, it was just a mess. Like she just had thought of it maybe an hour before she went to trial. She seems extremely ill prepared for trial. She had the gall to accuse the state of their folders being messy and unorganized and unprepared. After she had done this opening, she's complaining to the judge about a folder that the state gave her and how it was basically a mess. Your latex spouse says, thanks for the coverage today, Roberta and Patty. Yeah, Patty was in the courthouse. Hopefully she'll come on soon. Talk about what she saw in the courthouse. Also, Wendi was in trial. If you saw the thumbnail, Wendi was in court. She didn't testify. They didn't get to her today, but she was in court with her. She a victim's advocate, support person, Morgan Honeycutt. So last time we saw, thanks, your latex spouse. I appreciate it. I appreciate you moderating. So last time we saw Morgan Honeycutt. She was also with Wendi Adelson in the courthouse. But here she is looking very different. Let me take this down. Thank you for your patience. Not always the fastest at moving around. But here she is. There's Morgan Honeycutt. And there's Wendi Adelson. I believe this is Patty's photo from Patty's Playhouse photo that she took. Correct me if I'm wrong. So there's that. But let's start with Jackie Fulford's stomach-turning opening statement, which could be considered an egregious violation of victims' rights in itself. It's so insensitive and telling about who she is. Let's take a look at it. We move forward. So we're getting back from a break. I thought I had lined this up perfectly. My apologies. Oh, here we go.
For an hour, you heard about this killing.
Wait, let's go back to the real beginning.
Good morning. My name is Jackie Fulford, and I, along with Mr. Zellman, represent Mrs. Adelson, and I don't think you've heard my voice yet. Well, I'm going to try and talk slow because if I don't, the court reporter is going to scream at me.
So she starts off being very folksy, manipulating the jury into liking her. This is, I guess, I said she didn't have a phony persona. I guess there it is for about a minute and a half or less, 10 seconds.
I just want to start by saying this. Remember, during the course of the proceedings, that the state always gets to go first. But the defense has a right to be heard too. So please keep an open mind until you hear from us as well. You just sat through an opening statement. The presentation was pretty cool. I'm old-fashioned, so I don't use that kind of stuff. But for an hour, you heard about this killing. And we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Old-fashioned or cheap? You don't think she could hire someone to make a presentation for her? You don't think she could get her to what those? I thought maybe they were jury. So I have to go back. I thought they were jury specialists, consultants, but those two women on the end are what we originally thought, correction, that they're paralegals. You don't think Jackie Fulford could get her two paralegals to make her trial presentation, or hire people who specialize in trial presentations? It's a whole specialty. You don't think Donna Adelson would pay for that? So she thinks she's going to be well liked by playing the underdog and being like, well, I just have my bulletin board here, or whatever, my foam exhibits. While the state has their fancy exhibits. We're not fancy. We're the underdog. I mean, everything is done strategically in this opening to manipulate.
And you heard an awful lot about why they think Donna Adelson has the motive to kill Danny Markell. And you heard an awful lot about what other people did in this case. But not a single piece of evidence was discussed that shows that Donna Adelson planned this, hired anybody to do this, or intended that this happen. And I just want you to be mindful that when we're at the end of the case and the judge gives you the instructions, and he gives them, I won't do that. When he gives you the instructions, he's not going to give you an instruction that says the state has to prove motive.
Wow, did you see that look Donna gave her lawyer, Josh Zellman? Did she not like him? Did everybody see that look? It's a little hard for me to manipulate this, so I went back and I raised the sound because the sound was really low. I made my own copy. It's a little bit more difficult for me to maneuver. But let's see this again.
Hired anybody to do this, or intended that this happen. And I just want you to be mindful that when we're at the end of the case and the judge gives you the instructions, and he gives them, I won't do that. When he gives you the instructions, he's not going to give you an instruction that says the state has to prove motive. He's going to give you elements of each.
She looks like she does not like Zellman there. She gives him a side eye like, oh, you have to sit closer to me. The reason he's sitting closer to her, maybe so he can see better, but it's also to get the jury the idea that he likes his client. Leslie Abramson, Eric Menendez's lawyer, was genius at this. She also represented Phil Spector for a minute and a half, and she would walk in to court arm in arm with her accused, their murderer client. They were all convicted. I mean, both of them were convicted of murder. But to say that they are harmless, she likes them, or she would take their shirt and sort of rearrange their collar and fiddle with their sweater. She would do that with Eric Menendez, be very motherly towards him. Eva says, Roberta, can you play Luis's first interrogation with law enforcement? He says so much about Wendi. It's he and 3 other officers. Yes, Eva, I was looking at that the other day. Yeah, that'll be another episode. I'll get to it, Eva, definitely. I noticed the sound has been, whoever worked on that sound, they've dramatically improved it, and it sounds excellent. So yeah, I'd love to play that. For a while, the sound was really poor, Eva. And that's why I think I played some of it on this channel a long time ago. But now it's been drastically improved. Should I be like Jackie Fulford? I don't know much about sound. I don't know much about that fancy sound. So I had to wait till other people improve the video. So silly. Really emphasizing her Southern drawl.
And he's going to say that each element of each offense has to have actual evidence to prove that. Not motive, actual evidence that those things happen. We're going to have a long trial. And I know you all are kind of prepared for that, at least in your mind, you know it's going to happen.
Thank you for reminding me. This is another revolting thing that Jackie Fulford did in her opening. She pretended like she didn't know the law, that testimony is evidence. She's trying to exploit the jury's ignorance on the law, even though it was mentioned in jury selection by Georgia Kappelman that all testimony is evidence. She's going to remark on the lack of physical evidence that can, although there is some that connects Donna to this crime, but much of it is testimony. Much of it is video, also evidence, audio, also evidence. But she's exploiting years and years of wrongful conviction narratives that DNA is the only way to solve a crime. It's the gold standard. They should have found, I don't know. I mean, the point of a murder for hire is you don't get your hands dirty. They did this with Richard Glossop in Oklahoma. He's getting a new trial ridiculously. It's another murder for hire case. And they often emphasize the lack of DNA. Well, yeah. He took great pains not to touch anything. Ditto Donna Adelson. She washed the money. She didn't even want to hand over money with her DNA on it. This is not going to be there. So she says the refrain of innocence fraudsters, innocence fraud campaigns, and sleazy defense lawyers everywhere. That refrain, of course, is there's no evidence against my client. Great. Why are we having a 2 to 3 week trial then? Let's hand it to the jury now if there's no evidence. No one testifying. Wow, that's an unusual trial. Okay, I'm just going to go through a tiny bit of hers and then we'll get to Sarah Dugan's. I just wanted to give you a flavor of it.
And it's going to be long and we're going to have days. And you're going to hear a lot of evidence and phone calls and text messages and emails. But I want to ask you to never, ever stop thinking for the 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks that we're here about why it is we are really here. Not just because Donna Adelson is on trial, but because 2 men killed Danny Markell. Don't forget Danny. He was an amazing professor. He was very well educated. He had 2 degrees, I think, from Harvard, one of them from law school.
So here's Jackie Fulford taking what the state naturally has is their fight for justice for the victim and stealing it for herself. So the way you could really get justice for the victim is by freeing one of his murderers. I find this so repulsive. Maybe she was inspired by a recent trial that we just watched together. I don't know, but she has no right to call him Danny. Well, her client is Mrs. Adelson. That's how she refers to her client. And she just said that there's no evidence, and she'll go on to say it again, that there's no evidence against her client, while saying that you're going to see a lot of evidence. Talking out of both sides of her mouth. I found this repulsive.
There. He was a professor. He had students. He was very well respected by his peers, his colleagues. He traveled all over the place to talk at conferences. They wanted him there for him to come and speak. Very, very intelligent man. And I can't say I know because I never met him. I wish I had. But I know he had to be proud of all that he had achieved. His career was important to him. Him continuing to educate himself so that he could get tenure at the law school as a professor. He worked very hard. He earned a lot. What he did not earn was for somebody to do this to him. You're going to hear that Wendi Adelson, the daughter of my client, was married to Danny. And I'm not trying to be informal when I say that. I respect Mr. Markell, Dr. Markell. But because so many people in the trial are going to refer to him as Danny, I'm going to do that if that's okay. But I don't mean any respect by doing it.
You know who's going to refer to him as Danny? Those who knew him. and loved him at one point or pretended to love him at one point. I'm talking about you, Wendi. No, you can't. There's another point where she calls Luis Rivera Luiser, and he says, Mr. Rivera, excuse me. Rightfully, he picks it out very streetwise exactly what this woman's about. That a low-life gang member, she'll do what she wants. She can call him by his first name like she knows him. I just found her so repellent is the word that kept coming to mind.
Disrespect by doing that. More important to Danny Markell than anything in the world were his little boys. He had 2 little children when this happened to him, a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old. When the divorce first happened, when Wendi moved out, he did not want the divorce. That was in 2012. And they squabbled during the divorce. They did. Each side argued for their side.
Each side argued for their side. Now listen to the way she says this next couple lines. Matt says, I don't know if I could restrain myself if I were Dan Markell's mom or dad. I thought the same thing, Matt. I'm pretty good at restraining myself in court and hearing outrageous things said in court. But this one, I don't know. I may have had to leave. You may have seen me walk out the door. Wait, I guess you can't walk out the door in the middle. You have to wait till the end of testimony. So I may have broken the rules. It may have been my last day in court. Okay, so listen to the way Jackie Fulford says this next line. She said they argued, they squabbled, they did, to remind yourself, right? Listen to this next couple lines.
The other side argued for their side. That's what happens in divorce. Divorce is not fun. Divorce is not usually friendly. Some of us have had friendly divorces, but not everybody does.
Okay. Did you hear that? And I thought, where have I heard that before? Where have I heard that before? That's the end of what I'm going to show you of Jackie Fulford's opening. You got a flavor for it. But where have I heard that before? Divorce is not fun. Divorce is not friendly. It's in Wendi's cross-examination. She's been watching Wendi's cross-examination. Listen to this. Here she is. Take a listen.
You came here because you were subpoenaed and had no choice,
Correct.
right?
This is not fun. I
You've
would not do this by choice.
You've been inconvenienced.
I've not been inconvenienced.
This is not fun. She picked that up from Wendi. Just to add some bizarreness. Did everybody hear that? Should I play it again? Did you all hear it? Odd, right? Okay, so now we're going to go back to the beginning. And here is, so I don't have much to say about Jackie Fulford's opening. It was a mess. It wasn't great, but cases aren't won or lost on opening statement, although you can lose credibility with a jury. But it's really just a preview, a trailer, like a movie trailer of things to come. It is not everything, but it's where you make the first impression on a jury. And you want the jury to be able to trust you. You only have so much credibility with a jury. Once you lose credibility, you've lost the case. So, especially, and this is especially, the burden is especially high on prosecutors because they carry with them the whole power of the state. So when they make mistakes, it's especially, and if they have to apologize to a jury, it is a massive screw up where defense attorneys are expected to play a little fast and loose with the truth. They're the underdog. They don't have the power of the state behind them. They're not the man, so to speak. All right, here is Sarah Catherine Dugan's opening statement. Take a listen.
Good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Sarah Catherine Dugan. Georgia Kappelman and I are representing the state of Florida in this case. And this is the defendant, Donna Adelson. We see her here at the defense table, and this is how she appeared back in 2014 when this crime occurred 11 years ago. And the reason that we're here today is because this defendant, Donna Adelson, was part of a conspiracy to hire a hitman to kill her former son-in-law, Dan Markel. This murder was set into motion because back in 2014, this defendant's family had a big problem. And the big problem was Dan Markel. And the solution to that problem was the defendant's son, Charlie Adelson. Charlie Adelson's solution because he had a girlfriend with connections to the type of people who were willing and capable.
All right, just to give you a little preview of things to come. Also, Donna Adelson got reprimanded for emotionally manipulating the jury by Judge Everett today. We're going to go over that. It was another jaw dropper. The opening first day of Donna Adelson's trial. There was also some of this we're going to go over Saturday, Sunday. We have quite a lot of testimony, and thankfully we have a couple days to go over it. So today is going to be mostly opening statements. But Judge Everett called Donna out in a way that I haven't seen him do before, or call out any defendant or witness in this case. Pretty shocking moment.
Capable of pointing a gun at a complete stranger and pulling the trigger. The victim in this case, Dan Markel, was known as Danny to his friends and family. He was a loving father to 2 little boys, and he was a highly respected law professor at Florida State University College of Law. Tragically, on July 18th of 2014, Dan Markel was shot in the head in broad daylight in the driveway of his home in the Benton Hills neighborhood here in Tallahassee. The last day of his life began like any other day of his that summer. He woke up, he took his 2 young sons to preschool to work out. After finishing his workout, he returned home, he pulled into his driveway, and he opened his garage. By 2 hired hitmen who traveled all the way to Tallahassee from Miami for the sole purpose of taking his life. And like something out of a horror movie, when he pulled into his driveway, the killers pulled in right behind him. Moments later, Dan Markel's neighbor heard a gunshot, and he looked out the window and saw a light-colored Toyota Prius back quickly out of Dan Markel's driveway and speed away.
Okay, I did not notice that it's a driveway. They have all the slides on a driveway. So anticipating that the state was going to say he was a beloved professor, he was called Danny, he loved his boys, the defense does it. Yeah, we're victim advocates too. Release his killer. Something I find so disgusting. In every campaign to release a guilty killer, they make them victims. Oh, for example, the Menendez brothers, they were abused. Don't look into the actual evidence of it, because there's not much, and it's not very good or convincing. but don't look into it. They're just victims. They had, you would have killed your parents too and reloaded and come back and then gone on a shopping spree too. And then got involved in a tax fraud with the gang members in
The
prison.
neighbor thought that was very unusual, very suspicious. So he waited a second to see if Dan Markell also backed out of his driveway or came out of his house. And when he didn't see him, the neighbor got, a very funny feeling. And he went over to Dan Markell's open garage to see if there was anything wrong. And he found a gruesome scene. Dan Markell's car window, his driver's side window, was shattered. His glasses and his phone were on the ground next to his car. And Dan Markell was behind the wheel. He was unresponsive and moaning and terribly injured. The neighbor called 911 and law enforcement arrived to find Dan Markell with a gunshot wound to the head. He was taken to the hospital where...
Okay, I'm not a big fan of attorneys, but someone just said there's manipulation on both sides. What's the difference between the state saying Danny was a beloved law professor, was known as Danny to his friends? First of all, they're advocating for the victim's family. They're in touch with the victim's family. They get paid a fraction of what defense attorneys do. And so they advocate, they represent the state, the people in the state, but and they also represent the victim's family and the victim searching for justice. So when when they manipulate, if you're going to say there's manipulation, that's the purpose. The purpose isn't to free a psychopathic, dangerous murderer or get them acquitted like Donna Adelson or Eric Menendez or Amanda Knox, or I don't know, I could list a zillion of them. That's the difference in the court shenanigans. But I agree with you. There is manipulations. There's theatrics in trials. Manipulation, theatrics. What else? Acting. And we don't hear all the evidence. We hear a tailored, all the evidence is put together and edited. We hear an edited view of the evidence. Because if we heard all the evidence in the case, they worry that the jury couldn't follow it. It would be too long. So we don't see and hear all the evidence in any trial. It's what the prosecutor wants to show the jury. It's what they think is going to be most convincing. So there's where the manipulation is again.
He survived for about 14 hours before he was pronounced dead. Dan Markell was only 41 years old. And his little boys, who were deprived of their father after this murder, were just 3 and 4 years old. Bless you. Law enforcement began to investigate to try to figure out who did this, who shot Dan Markell. The scene there, the crime scene, left no trace of the killers. There was no fingerprints, no DNA, no bullet casing, nothing was stolen. And so police began to suspect that this may be a professional killing. The little evidence that they do have sends them down 2 separate paths. One path is to track down that light-colored Prius that the neighbor saw fleeing from the scene. And the other is to identify who was inside that Prius. And the other path relates to motive. Who in Dan Markell's life would hate him enough to hire a professional killer to kill him? And after years of tireless investigation, both of these paths led directly to this defendant. So first, let's talk about the path involving motive. We'll go down both paths this morning. Police investigated Dan Markel's personal life to try to figure out a motive in this case, to see who might want him dead. And they learned that Dan Markel was entangled in a very nasty divorce with his ex-wife, who is the defendant's daughter. And his ex-wife is named Wendi Adelson. A review of the divorce case file reveals that Wendi Adelson had asked the court to allow her to relocate to Miami, where she was from and where her parents lived, with her children and Dan Markel's children, in order to be closer to her mother, Donna Adelson, to her father, whose name is Harvey Adelson, and to her brother, whose name is Charlie Adelson. The victim, Dan Markel, as y'all can imagine, is adamantly opposed to this, to his children being relocated to Miami. He works here in Tallahassee. He's a law professor here in Tallahassee. This is where he lives. This is where his kids have been raised. He wants his children here with him. A review by law enforcement of Wendi Adelson's emails made it clear that her mother, the defendant, hated Dan Markel and was the relentless driving force behind Wendy's relocation efforts to South Florida. And, you know, being a caring and involved parent is great, but the defendant's participation in her children's lives went beyond mere involvement or even meddling. She was extremely controlling. She had very strong opinions about all the decisions in Wendi Adelson's life, whether it be about her career, her relationships, or even purchasing a home. And if Wendi Adelson would not do as the defendant wanted her to do, the defendant often then enlisted Charlie Adelson, her son, Wendy's brother, to solve the problem by getting him to kind of go to Wendi and persuade Wendi until Wendi ultimately agreed to do what the defendant wanted her to do. And while the defendant had always been controlling of her children's lives, the emails uncovered by law enforcement showed that this defendant was desperate to find a way for Wendi and Dan Markel's children, her grandchildren, to be able.
So Maestro says, hold on. The newest innocence fraud spokesperson is a con man who claims to be a professional gambler and has a face full of tattoos. His last podcast appearance, he threatened a host and walked out. His name is Nicky Mays, M-A-S-E. He ended a podcast saying to a child, "I'll kick your ass. Donate to the Innocence Project," then walked out. Well, sounds about right. Does anybody remember Josh Dugan? The Innocence Project ambassador was Charlie Adelson's. It was his jury consultant. Does anybody remember him? He brought on a guy named Sheldon Johnson to Joe Rogan, who he helped get out of prison because he was given a 50-year sentence for attempted murder because the judge had warned him the 2 other times when he got caught for attempted murder, armed robbery. I think attempted murder was dropped in one of those charges, that he would throw the book at him, and he did. So the 3rd time he came in front of him, Sheldon Johnson came in front of this same judge. The judge threw the book at him. And there is Josh Dugan on Joe Rogan saying the sentence was outrageous and racist, et cetera, and they got him out of prison because he was so rehabilitated. Less than a month after being on Joe Rogan, the neighbors hear his friend, Sheldon Johnson's friend in the building in the Bronx, go, "Hey man, don't, I have kids." And then gunshots. And then you see on the CCTV footage, Sheldon Johnson walking out in wigs and disguises in and out of the building for hours. And the decapitated body of Sheldon Johnson's friend was found some in his apartment freezer and some in the victim's apartment.
Able to relocate to Miami. The defendant
And then Joe Rogan laughed about it because nobody pushes this nonsense fraud more than Joe Rogan, laughed about it and said that an unfortunate accident happened, an unfortunate incident happened with Josh Dubin's last guest, that Josh Dubin introduces a miracle of rehabilitation and a wonderful, loving
Told
human
Wendi
being.
that she deserved more than just a life teaching in Tallahassee without her family, and that Dan Markel was essentially holding her hostage in Tallahassee because of his job. During the divorce and custody battle, the defendant's email showed that she was heavily involved in Wendi's court case, even going so far as to draft and edit the documents that Wendi and her attorney were filing in court, and emailing Wendi instructions for her attorney on arguments her attorney should make and what her attorney should do. The defendant would guilt trip Wendi Adelson about how much time she and her husband, Harvey Adelson, were having to spend away from their dental practice to visit Wendi and the grandkids in Tallahassee.
And how much money they lost, and that tell the judge that they've lost money. Sheldon Johnson's victim was Colin Small, his friend Colin Small. FYI. But they used him as an example of huge unfair sentencing, and Colin Small would still be alive if Josh Dubin and his host of do-gooders that really just do evil hadn't gotten him out of prison.
Complain about how the family was losing income, losing patients because of their constant absences from the practice. And the defendant instructed Wendi Adelson that relocation to Miami was the most important priority in this divorce, and if it had to be her non-negotiable in the divorce. In June of 2013, the judge in the divorce case ended up ruling in Dan Markel's favor. And not only did the judge deny Wendi's relocation motion, but the judge dismissed it in a way that prevented Wendi Adelson from requesting the relocation again. So Wendi would not be permitted to move to Miami to be close to the defendant and her husband with the children at that time or ever, unless of course something happened to Dan Markel. After the judge denied the relocation motion, after that was denied, the defendant told Wendi Adelson in emails that Dan Markel has not beaten the Adelson family yet. She let Wendi know that the Adelson family is a team and they are trying to win. Donna Adelson suggested in her emails several bribes to get Dan Markel to agree to relocation.
Right. Why was I so shocked that Donna was offering veneers, prescription drugs, property, places to stay for favorable testimony when she was doing these kind of, offering these kind of, suggesting these kind of psychological tactics and bribes to Dan Markel?
Like plane tickets, paying for her grandson's education. And the defendant even suggested offering Dan Markel a $1 million bribe to allow the relocation, to let Wendi move to Miami with the boys. And if the bribes didn't work, the defendant also suggested several ways that Wendi could threaten or bully Dan Markel into submission. The defendant told Wendi to aggravate Dan Markel like he aggravates you. And the defendant set out a plan of action that the defendant told Wendi would make Dan Markel absolutely miserable. And she's detailing all of these in her emails. So, for the plan of action, the defendant knew that Dan Markel was devoutly Jewish. So she came up with the idea for Wendi to pose Dan Markel's sons for pictures in front of a Catholic church, and then post the pictures to social media, and even announce on social media she was getting the children baptized just to make it appear to Dan Markel that she was changing their religion. The defendant assured Wendi Adelson that this would all be an act to get Dan Markel to agree to let her move to Miami, but told Wendi Adelson that in order to pull off this stunt, she had to put on the acting performance of her life.
You can be a very good actress when you want to, Wendi, said Donna. You can be a very good actress. We found out today that Donna is using her acting skills. We saw some of them at earlier hearings, but apparently she was. First of all, let me just say something. Now, Sonny Tanner, shout out to you, Sonny, who's not at this trial, but was at Charlie's trial, says for Donna's defense, she found it hard to hear from the gallery. Okay. But we know that Donna never had any trouble hearing at any of these hearings. She never requested headphones at any of these hearings before. She's walking with a limp now. Something I forgot to mention in the opening, Donna's theatrics, as I predicted. Because what did she have? Her age. She has to play up her age and her infirmity. So, but apparently Jackie Fulford, I don't know what she did to her leg. She's limping too. So I don't know if this is a limp she's always had or it's a recent injury, or if it's like the way that she copies the way Wendi Adelson talks, and it's a kind of viral leg limp. She's picked it up from Donna. So I don't know, but Donna Adelson is trying to manipulate the jury, acting. Oh, like Vincent the Chin. My boyfriend saying he was an American mobster. Actually worked for a guy who lived in the same building. The Genevieve's crime family, who famously feigned mental illness for decades to evade law enforcement. They use if you've seen The Sopranos, they use the junior's soprano when he pretends to be out of his mind, lost his mind, dementia, Alzheimer's, to get special treatment in court and stay out of prison. They base that on Vinny the Chin. Cosby used it, played up his blindness. Harvey Weinstein used it, came in a walker, played up his age. People were saying about Bill Cosby, who'd gotten away with it for years. That reporting on that story had been out since the early 2000s. I did an interview with Mark Ebner, who broke the Bill Cosby story. It's one of the first people to break it. And then I also, now I'm forgetting her name, but I also, who really broke it, the woman who really broke it, I interviewed her too about Bill Cosby in the local Philadelphia paper. She's got like 3 names. I'll remember it in a second. I'll come back to you about Bill Cosby, but all that was out there, but he pretended to be blind. People were saying he's too old to convict. And they're looking for someone on the jury who doesn't want to send a grandmother to prison, because anything over 10, 15 years is, like, let's face it, probably a life sentence.
The defendant said that it did not matter to her if Wendi had to dress her 2 little toddlers up in Nazi or SS uniforms, as long as she was able to get them to South Florida and show Dan Markel that he was not in control. The defendant repeatedly told Wendi Adelson that the rest of her life, meaning Wendy's,
Nicole Wisney Egan. Yeah, that's who thank you, honey. That's who I interviewed. Nicole Wisney Egan, who broke the Bill Cosby story. You can go back to my episode with her. It's actually an IMDb. I didn't know the podcast made IMDb. Nicole Wisney Egan on Bill Cosby's protectors, enablers, and brave survivors. In March 26, 2020, I did that interview.
Life, as well as the defendant's life, Harvey Adelson's life, and Charlie Adelson's life depended on Wendi Adelson and the boys being able to relocate to Miami. And the defendant said that she would never, never, never give up and never stop fighting for Wendi and the boys to be relocated to Miami. And she never did. The evidence in this case will show you that this defendant's closest confidant was her son, Charlie Adelson. She and Charlie Adelson talk multiple times a day, every day. And he was the person with whom she would constantly vent and complain to about Wendy's situation here in Tallahassee, having to live in Tallahassee with her sons. And she would often, the defendant would use very dramatic life and death terms to describe it. The defendant portrayed Dan Markell to Charlie Adelson as a crazy person who was impossible to deal with and was causing an extreme amount of stress to Donna Adelson and her husband, Harvey Adelson. And Charlie Adelson was also the person that Donna Adelson relied on to solve her problems. And her daughter and grandsons having to live 8 hours away in Tallahassee was a big, big problem for this defendant. And this defendant made it Charlie Adelson's problem to solve. And although the divorce between Wendi and Dan Markell was final a year before the murder, throughout that year, litigation is still ongoing, to say the least. Each side is continuing to routinely file violations of the custody agreement, violations of the settlement agreement, and that continued right up until Dan Markell's death in 2014. A few months before the murder in 2014, Dan Markell alleged that the defendant, Donna Adelson, was disparaging him to his children. He was very worried about her trying to alienate him from his children. She was doing this by calling him stupid in front of the boys and telling the boys that Dan Markell was trying to take them away from her. Dan Markell asked the court to prevent this defendant from having unsupervised contact with her grandchildren. And this motion was still pending in court when Dan Markell was killed. And the murder of Dan Markell ensured that not having access to her grandchildren would never be a problem for this defendant. And what do you know? About 48 hours after Dan Markell was killed, after the shooting happened, Wendi Adelson and the little boys relocated to Miami, moved into the defendant's home with her, and the boys started school down the street. And just like that, their father was effectively erased from their lives, and the Adelsons' big problem had been solved. You'll hear during this trial that the Adelson family is a very tight-knit family. The defendant, her son Charlie Adelson, and her husband Harvey Adelson actually all worked together at their family's dental practice. The defendant, Harvey Adelson and Charlie Adelson are dentists there, and the defendant managed their accounts at the office. She was the details person. And this defendant, though, she managed much more. than just the office for the Adelson family. She was the matriarch, and a domineering one at that. She ran the office, the home, and the lives of the Adelson family members. After Dan Markel was killed, law enforcement interviewed Wendi Adelson. Wendi Adelson told police, and the police confirmed this, that she was at home having her TV fixed at home.
Or she was with her alibi, as Charlie Adelson puts it. He laments on those jailhouse calls over and over again. Why did Wendi Adelson leave her alibi? To drive by the crime scene. Wasn't part of the plan. Check out my shorts
at
on
her
that.
home in Tallahassee, having her TV fixed at the time of Dan Markel's murder. And when police asked her, well, you know, do you know anyone who would have a motive to kill Dan Markel? Wendi Adelson acknowledged that her family had a motive to want Dan Markel dead, and said that her parents had more reason to dislike Dan Markel than anybody else. At one point in the interview, police allowed Wendi Adelson to make a phone call to her parents to let them know that Dan Markel had been shot. And after she got off the phone with her mother, the defendant, Wendi Adelson said to police, well, they acted surprised, so that's a relief. And when asked by law enforcement if anyone could have killed Dan Markel on her behalf, she also told the police about her brother, Charlie Adelson. Wendi admitted to police that her brother, Charlie Adelson, had joked that he looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel as a divorce present.
Well, she knew the road was going to lead back to them eventually. So what better way to look innocent than to bring it up first? That's what an innocent person does. Brings it up first. Says they know why they're going to be a suspect. I know, but then she does it a little too much. She says it over and over again. I know I'm a suspect. I know, almost like she's understanding, not angry. Not like, I know I'm a suspect, but get past me and find the real killers. I know I'm a suspect, and this is the last time I'm ever going to cooperate with you, police. Then my whole family's going to clam up. They know they're going to come to them eventually. And she has to know that they're all going to lawyer up. This is her one chance to talk to the police. What better way to look innocent than to bring it up first? That's my feeling. I know other people feel that she put her family under the bus and was going to pretend like she didn't know. I don't think so. I think they knew it had to come back to, if it came back to her, if the policing, I didn't think she thought the policing would be that good, but if it did, I mean, it gives her an out in two ways. One, nobody who would be involved would help them out, right? Lead them to her parents or her brother. Two, she'll say, pretend like they all did it and she had no knowledge. There are still some people in this community who feel that Charlie and Donna did this as a favor to Wendi without her knowing, which is the most ridiculous thing and is disproven. First of all, you don't give to them. It was a gift. Remember, in the Adelson's mindset, this was a gift. So you don't give a gift that you can't return, that has massive consequences, that uproots your family life, permanently traumatizes your children, although I think they're also psychopathic in that family, that they don't think that way. But on a shallow surface level, you don't give a gift like that you don't know if Wendy's going to like it. Oh, we can't return it? Oh, too bad. Your ex-husband's just dead. You didn't want that? Oh, too bad. It's for the best. But it's disproven by this text message from Donna to Wendi. And it's slightly edited. Your brother protected you for years. Now you're not guilty. So I'm going to repeat myself for those who've been listening to my episodes. Forgive me for repeating myself, but now you're not guilty. That means that there's been a change. There's something different about this moment than that moment before. So before she had to be guilty, but now she's not. So she was all a part of this, but now you're, what it means is pretending to be not guilty. Your lawyer took good care of you. Your lawyer didn't keep your brother's lawyer didn't keep him out of prison. This is before Donna gets arrested. So she knew they were coming for her soon. She was trying to flee to Vietnam when she wrote that, I believe. It was right after her son was convicted. So yeah, she was trying to flee to Vietnam when that was written to avoid the grand jury that was going to indict her on that Wednesday, the 15th. She left Monday, November 13th, on a plane to Vietnam with a one-way ticket.
But decided to buy her a TV instead because it was cheaper. And what do you know? The same TV that Charlie Adelson bought his sister as a divorce gift would be Wendi Adelson's alibi the morning of the murder. An alibi, the TV repair appointment that was set up by her parents.
Take note of Donna Adelson shaking her head no. And they're talking about the TV alibi. So for those listening on podcast, as Sarah Dugan is describing the TV as an alibi, there's Donna shaking her head, not vigorously, just slightly side to side and looking angry like, oh, they don't get it. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's all a coincidence. It's like a movie coincidence, but it happens. It happens.
Harvey Adelson and Donna Adelson, the defendant. So this path of looking into Dan Markel's personal life to see who would have motive to kill him leads law enforcement to the Adelsons, including this defendant, a woman who vowed to never, 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 never give up on getting her daughter and grandsons to Miami, and her son, Charlie Adelson, who told his family that he'd looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel, as Wendi said, was just a joke. But if Charlie Adelson was just joking about hiring a hitman, that joke, that stopped being funny when Dan Markel was actually killed by a hitman. While the police are trying to investigate motive, they are simultaneously following that second path of the investigation by tracking down that light-colored Prius the neighbor saw fleeing from the scene. When law enforcement retraced Dan Markel's steps on the morning of his murder, they uncovered some very chilling surveillance video of that light-colored Prius fitting the description given by the neighbor, following Dan Markel into the Premier Gym parking lot and waiting for an hour while he was inside, and then following him home from Premier Gym back to Benton Hills. And these surveillance images, coupled with a massive amount of phone and SunPass records gathered in this case, help police track down the exact car used to commit this crime. But police still had to figure out, okay, we got the car, but who was in this car? And why did that person kill Dan Markel? So law enforcement did a painstaking review of digital evidence in this case. And when I say painstaking, finding this Prius and finding evidence in these phone records was not an easy task. And it took much longer than your average investigation of a shooting, as you'll hear. But law enforcement eventually found that needle in the haystack. They found a number that communicated with the cell tower that services Premier Gym at the exact time when the Prius was there. And it was a number with a Miami area code. And that number belonged to a man named Sigfredo Garcia. Law enforcement examined Garcia's call logs, and they saw that he was in frequent contact with another number that was present at Premier Gym that day. And that number belonged to a man named Luis Rivera, who is a longtime friend of Garcia, and he's also from Miami. They both are. Police then looked at Garcia and Rivera's phone records, which showed that their phones left Miami 2 days before the murder, so July 16th. They came to Tallahassee, and on the day of the murder, on the 18th, they followed Markel to Premier Gym. The phone data shows that these men turned their phones off just minutes before the murder took place, and their phones then stayed off for about an hour or so after the murder until they were well southbound to Miami. I think around the Gainesville area, the phones turned back on. And then once they got back to Miami, a bank's ATM camera caught them in the light colored Prius at a bank drive-through and caught both of the men in the Prius. So police figured out the identity of the two men responsible for following and killing Dan Markel. But they continued to look for evidence to explain why these seemingly random men came all the way to Miami. Came all the way to Tallahassee to kill a man that they'd never met. What or who is the connection between the killers and the victim? The defendant in her emails obviously had demonstrated ample motive to want Dan Markel dead, but how do we get from these two random and hired killers to her? Well, those phone records that I talked about, they revealed that one of the shooter, Garcia's, most frequent contacts was a woman named Catherine Magbanois. She goes by Katie. The shooter and Magbanois have a long history of an on-again, off-again relationship, and they share 2 kids in common. This is Garcia and Magbanois. And lo and behold, these 2 paths of the shooter's car and the motive, they converge when law enforcement sees that Catherine Magbanois is also one of the most frequent contacts in the phone records of Charlie Adelson, the defendant's son, the same son that she had been nagging to death about his sister being stuck in Tallahassee. Law enforcement also learned that at the time of this murder, Catherine Magbanois was dating Charlie Adelson. So Dan Markel was a problem the defendant needed to solve. The defendant's son, Charlie Adelson, was looking to hire a hitman to kill Dan Markel. Dan Markel is killed by a hitman. And who ended up being the hitman? The hitman that killed Dan Markel? Someone with a close relationship to Charlie Adelson's girlfriend, the father of her children. So you can see how both paths, followed by investigators, charted the way to this defendant. Not only by looking into the motive, led law enforcement to the defendant because of her hatred of Dan Markel and her son's apparent efforts to hire someone to kill him, but also looking into that car fleeing the scene led law enforcement to the defendant through her son's girlfriend at the time. So 2 investigations, 1 conclusion. Law enforcement also tried to follow the money in this case, and that was a 3rd way that the evidence in this case pointed to the defendant. Law enforcement reviewed bank records, employment records, DHS-MV records of all the suspects, and saw that in the months after the homicide, Garcia, Rivera, and Magbanois all acquired some big-ticket items. Rivera and Garcia both bought motorcycles and cars.
Was anybody seen Goodfellas when all the people in the airplane heist buy big cars and fur coats for their goumois and their wives, and it reminds me of that. And they get very angry. De Niro's character gets very angry. Don't buy anything big, lay low. But like Wendi driving by the crime scene, they just couldn't help themselves.
Benoit got a breast augmentation surgery and later received a black Lexus sedan whose previous owner was Harvey Adelson. Catherine McBanois' bank records were analyzed, and there was no check ever written.
That's something I forget, is that Catherine McBanois got Harvey's car. I mean, I guess Donna could say, well, they were dating. He did something nice for her. But Harvey's what happened to my car? What happened to my car? Oh, we gave it to Charlie's ex-girl. You gave it to her? You just gave it to her? You know how cheap they are? They don't want to pay $5,000. So, I mean, there's another reason Harvey's been fingered as an unindicted co-conspirator in the prosecution's filings. This car, I forget that detail.
Or matching cash withdrawal for the car or the breast augmentation. Bank records also showed that McBanois' account had a huge spike in cash deposits around the time of the murder. She deposited more money in her account in the 5 weeks after the murder than in the entire year before the murder. And this was during a time when there was no record of her being employed anywhere. And also, about 2 months after the murder, this defendant added Catherine McBanois to the payroll at the Adelson family's dental practice, the one that she kept the accounts for, the defendant kept the accounts for. And the defendant started issuing her regular checks from their business account every 2 weeks, despite the fact that she did not work there at the time. McBanois didn't work there. Law enforcement noticed that each one of the 44 checks that were written to Catherine McBanois every 2 weeks over the course of the next 2 years after the murder were signed by this defendant, Donna Adelson. So the money was talking, but what about the suspects? Law enforcement wanted to know what they were saying. In examining the phone records in this case, law enforcement noticed a distinct pattern of communication surrounding important events or dates in this case. The phone calls always went from this defendant to her son, Charlie Adelson, and then from her son, Charlie Adelson, to his girlfriend, Catherine McBanois, and then from his girlfriend, Catherine McBanois, to the shooter, Garcia, and then back the other way, like train cars. They only seem to touch the car directly in front and directly behind them. The defendant never calls her son's girlfriend, Catherine McBanois, or the shooter, or vice versa. Charlie Adelson never calls the shooter, or vice versa. So, if this is a murder for hire conspiracy, as law enforcement suspects, could it be that the defendant and Charlie Adelson are wisely insulating themselves from the actual shooters by having McBanois act as the middleman? Law enforcement decided to launch an undercover operation designed to clarify who are the members of this conspiracy and how information was traveling within the conspiracy. Police applied for and received court authorization to listen in real time to the phone calls of Charlie Adelson and Catherine McBanois, the people in the middle of this train car. And this is what's known as a wiretap. By this point, though, It was April of 2016. It took about 2 years to do this investigation to find out who was in the car and to get this wiretap going. So at this point, it's been 2 years, almost 2 years since the murder. And at this point, in April of 2016, Charlie Adelson and Magbanois are no longer dating. They'd been broken up for over a year. Catherine Magbanois at this point is actually back together with Garcia. We heard they're on again, off again, and have these kids together. Charlie Adelson has moved on to, he's had many other girlfriends at that point since Magbanois. And Charlie Adelson and Magbanois, though, they are still friends. They remain close friends since their breakup, and they're still in regular communication by April of 2016, even though they're not together anymore. Rivera, the second hitman in that Prius, was in prison by this point, doing time on an unrelated charge. And the defendant is happily taking care of her grandkids all day, every day. So all the members of this conspiracy have presumably gone on with their lives, believing they've gotten away with murder. So what reason would they have to be discussing the murder at that point if police are listening in? They wouldn't. So police needed to stage an event that would generate some conversation, some activity between the members of the conspiracy. So
we had someone on the jury panel say that he didn't like the idea of entrapment, that maybe they said, how do you feel about undercover operations? And he said, well, if it's entrapment right away, I hope that guy is not on the jury. Hope he's not an alternate. I hope the state booted him. It's my worry is that someone will be offended and think that Donna was entrapped in this case and feel sorry for the poor entrapped grandmother on trial.
They could see who the members of the conspiracy were. Their plan was to send an undercover agent posing as someone on behalf of Luis Rivera. He was the hitman who was incarcerated by April of 2016, to walk up to the defendant, Donna Adelson, on the street. There's a fly right in front of me. It won't leave me alone. To walk up to Donna Adelson on the street and try to blackmail her for money. Law enforcement refers to this as a bump. So this undercover agent posing as a blackmailer, and this is an actual picture from the surveillance cameras, that this is the undercover agent passing a piece of paper to Donna Adelson back in 2016. This undercover agent is posing as a blackmailer. He hands the defendant a piece of paper, and on the piece of paper is a news article about Dan Markel's murder. And written on the piece of paper is a phone number and the amount of $5,000. He tells the defendant that he knows the Adelsons are taking care of Katie, and he's basically there to blackmail to get more money out of them or out of her on Rivera's behalf, to even things out, because he knows they're taking care of Katie. He never says Charlie Adelson's name or anything about Charlie Adelson to Donna Adelson. The defendant then puts the piece of paper in her purse and walks away without ever looking at the piece of paper, because she knew exactly what it was about. Then law enforcement listens in.
More shaking of the head for those listening on podcasts. More shaking of the head from Donna. Very slight, but still shaking of the head. I can't believe what I'm hearing. It's lies. It's untrue. It's not me. It's not me.
To see what will happen next. Will the defendant go straight to the police to report the blackmail? Or will she do something else entirely? And as suspected, based on the previously observed communication pattern, the first person that this defendant calls is Charlie Adelson, despite the fact that the blackmailer never mentioned Charlie Adelson to her. On that first call, you would think the first thing that Donna Adelson would say to Charlie Adelson is, oh my God, so crazy. Some man just came up to me, handed me an article about Danny's murder, and he's demanding money from us. But she never says any of that. In fact, the defendant never says Dan Markel's name at all. Instead, She tells Charlie Adelson that she needs to talk to him in person about some paperwork that was just delivered to her.
Now she's going to talk about the way their code words are used in this and the way you have to put what they're talking about in context, and it doesn't make sense. I thought this was a very effective part of Sarah Dugan's opening.
She said that it involves the two of us, and that he should know what she's talking about. The defendant and Charlie Adelson continue talking, and she says that he should bring cash to their meeting. And she says, the TV is probably about 5. The defendant tells Charlie Adelson that the man who approached her mentioned an ex-girlfriend. The defendant never says which ex-girlfriend of Charlie Adelson. She never says Magbanwa's name to Charlie Adelson in that phone call. She only says that the blackmailer mentioned an ex-girlfriend. Charlie Adelson never asked his mom, my ex-girlfriend? Which ex-girlfriend? He's had a lot. He never asked that. Because as the evidence will show, he didn't need to. He knew the TV is probably 5 meant that she was being blackmailed about Danny's murder, where the TV was the alibi, and he knew that the ex-girlfriend in question was the only ex-girlfriend that he had solicited to find a hitman for him, Catherine Magbanwa. And we know that because after this call with his mother, the defendant, Charlie Adelson, calls Catherine Magbanwa. He does not call his most recent ex-girlfriend or even the one before that. He calls Catherine Magbanwa. And his call to Catherine Magbanwa is the only call he makes to any ex-girlfriend after getting the information from his mother that the blackmailer mentioned an ex-girlfriend. And he hadn't dated her for about 1.5 years at that point. And although they threatened to do it very often, neither Charlie Adelson nor the defendant ever reported this attempted blackmail to the police. You all will hear the calls between the conspirators, and as you listen to these, you'll notice that they're being very cautious about what they say. It's apparent that they're being very careful about the words they use because they are all immediately suspicious that law enforcement could be behind the bump. Law enforcement could be the person who came up to them on the street and gave her the paperwork. And law enforcement could also be listening to their conversations. After Charlie Adelson's first call to Catherine Magbanwa,
we also know that around this time, Charlie Adelson was told by Mike, and I have an episode on this in a short, not to talk on the phone, which makes it even more outrageous that he insisted still to talk on the phone when Donna says, like, no, I'll see you. I'll meet you for dinner. I want to talk about this in person. Makes it clear 1,000 times, I'm exaggerating, but many times, that she doesn't want to talk about it on the phone. And Charlie persists. But what's curious is that Donna, well, we'll see if she gets convicted, never says, never says, well, Charlie, if it hadn't been for your big mouth, you wouldn't be in this trouble. She never says that. They blame Wendi. Charlie blames Donna for the TV talk, too much TV talk. Her emails, Wendy's book, but never his own big mouth. Because they're a very narcissistic family. They can, it's never their own fault. And Donna never takes the blame and says, I know, too much TV talk. No, it was just a coincidence.
Charlie Adelson then meets up in person with his mother, the defendant. And in person, she gives him the paperwork that this blackmailer gave to her and makes it Charlie Adelson's newest problem to solve. And naturally, What does Charlie Adelson do? He goes to the next train car, Catherine McBanois. Charlie Adelson and Catherine McBanois meet in person at a restaurant called Dolce Vita in Miami. And while they sit at their table in this busy, noisy restaurant, an undercover FBI agent is sitting at a table nearby with a camera hidden in a bag, recording the conversation. So this is an image from that video recording the conversation. And in the recording, we hear Charlie Adelson discussing whether the man who walked up to his mother could be an undercover police officer, or he could be someone trying to legitimately blackmail them. And if it's a blackmailer, is it somebody who just saw a way to make a quick buck? Or is it another situation entirely, which would be much worse for the Adelsons? Is it actually someone with inside information about Donna Adelson's role in the murder of Dan Markel? And that person could tell police what they know. Charlie Adelson reassures Katie, Catherine McBanois, that if it is the police, that is a good thing. Charlie Adelson thinks that, hey, if it's the police, that means the police don't have enough evidence to charge anybody. You know, they're just fishing for information. And in fact, Charlie Adelson tells her, hey, if they had any evidence, we would have already gone to the airport. It's important to note that at the time of this conversation at Dolce Vita, no arrests had been made in this case. And the only thing that police had released to the public at that point was a photo of the light-colored Prius that fled the scene. Police knew at that point that it was Garcia and Rivera who were in the Prius, but the public didn't know that yet. So that fact is interesting in light of some of the things that Charlie Adelson started saying to McBanois. He starts giving her several analogies involving rental cars being used to commit crimes. He reassures her that the police can't prove a person committed a crime just from
Oh no, did I freeze? I'll be right back, guys. I think my computer just froze. Hold on. I'll be right back. Try to fix this. Let me just remove this and put it back in. Okay. Now let's see if it'll go. Nope.
car that fled the scene.
There we
They
go.
still would not have enough evidence to hold anybody responsible for this murder. Charlie Adelson also says that crimes are tough to prove unless someone actually witnessed the suspect commit the crime, or the suspect confesses to the crime, or a suspect is caught on a wire talking about the crime. So he's trying to reassure her about the lack of evidence in this case, about no witnesses, and trying to let her know that, hey, as long as we all stay quiet and nobody confesses or gets caught talking on a wire, then we don't have anything to worry about. And he begins educating Catherine McBanois about how blackmail works. He tells her that, hey, if this is a guy who knows information, there's two ways of dealing with this guy. You know, we could call the police, but then the guy blackmailing us could be charged, and then that blackmailer is going to start talking, and the police are going to be asking questions about what happened. The other option is to pay the blackmailer, but let him know that this is just a one-time thing, and we'll try to scare him off by saying, if you come around again, we'll go to the police. Charlie Adelson gives McBanois very precise instructions on how to deal with the blackmailer. He tells her to call the blackmailer and tell her that my friends, meaning the Adelson family, have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm just going to give you this money as charity, but don't contact these people again or they'll go to the police. And Charlie.
Right. It's just charity. We're just giving charity. It's the $5,000 every couple months. The Adelson family gives out $5,000 to a needy gang member. But don't come back because it's only a one-time charity. You cannot be the recipient twice. So wait till you hear Donna's script that she was writing for these jailhouse informants. Wesley loves Oktoberfest. Thanks for being a member for 10 months. Hit the like and subscribe. It's free. Thank you, Wesley, for supporting the channel. New emojis coming up. I think some veneer emojis, some pill emojis are coming up. Donna pill emojis. Not exactly sure. I'm still thinking about how to do that. I mean, who would have thought offering veneers for perjury? Veneers, I'll give you some veneers for some perjured testimony. Oh. But wait till you hear her wooden script. It's coming up. Thanks, Wesley.
Adelson said he would give Magbanua the $5,000 to pay off the blackmailer who approached his mother, except that he's concerned that this guy won't go away. He'll get that $5,000 and then he'll just keep coming back for more money. We'll see him as an easy target. And so Charlie Adelson then offers that the best solution might be to have the blackmailer killed and that he's willing to pay whatever it takes. He says, "So help me God, if they F with my family, it's going to be Nazi shit because this will be done. I mean, Katie, I don't care what I spend." And after hearing that Charlie Adelson wants someone killed and is willing to pay whatever it takes to get it done, Magbanua then asked Charlie Adelson to help her out. And Charlie Adelson reassures her she'll be taken care of and reminds her she's on salary at the parents' dental practice. After Charlie Adelson finishes this meeting where he's getting Magbanua to then solve the problem of the blackmailer, he gives her they say goodbye, he gives her.
Does anyone know what the total benefits, half a boob job, everything that's on record that Katie Magbanua, I have to go back to her trial, got in this murder?
A big hug that's captured on camera outside by the FBI. And then Charlie Adelson immediately calls the defendant to let her know everything's fine and he has handled the situation. He does this using some pretty obvious code words that you'll often hear these conspirators use to mask the meaning of what they're talking about in case law enforcement's listening. Magbanua then, also using code words, calls Garcia. And she tasks him with calling the number on their paperwork and finding the identity of the blackmailer. And in the
Can one of the is Latex Spouse still here? Or Tater? Can you help Deb H with the emojis and how to bring up the emojis?
A series of recorded calls that y'all are going to hear later this week, you'll hear these conspirators talking and using words like TV, relationship advice, false leads, listings, patients, properties, clients, rap songs, CDs, pigs, all these terms that are obviously normal words, but they're used in context that if you're listening to the conversation don't make sense. So after that undercover operation was over in 2016, Luis Rivera and Sigfredo Garcia are arrested. And they're charged with the same charges before y'all in this trial. Luis Rivera, who was the second person in that Prius, cut a deal with the state and told law enforcement the truth about the murder of Dan Markel and the people responsible for it. He told police that he was hired by his longtime friend Garcia to help kill Dan Markel. Rivera described how Garcia told him that this was a job that Magbanua was able to get for them, and it was in Tallahassee, and it paid $100,000, and that Rivera was going to get a third of the money. Rivera said that during the trip to Tallahassee, Garcia had a piece of paper with a picture of the man that they were hired to kill, and some handwritten notes. And during that trip, Rivera said that the first call that either of them made after the homicide was from Garcia to
Deb H. Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry, I thought it was the emojis. How do you get the thing to pop up? I don't know.
Magbanois, where Garcia told her that the job was done and Magbanois assured them they would get their money the next day, which they did. That Magbanois brought the money the next morning to Rivera's home. And law enforcement checked cell phone records, which corroborated Rivera's information. Law enforcement told police that the money that he received from Magbanois the next day was packaged in a very unusual way. The money was basically in stacks of 1,000. Each stack was made up of $100 bills that were then stapled together. And after each stack was stapled together of 1,000. And after learning this from Rivera, Magbanois was arrested, and that was in October of 2016. During this trial, you'll hear that the Adelson family had access to a lot of cash because their family gave cash discounts at their dental practice. Like if you paid in cash, you would have to pay less than if you paid on a card or check. And they kept the cash that they received in stacks, and they stored it in a safe. Law enforcement also learned from Charlie Adelson's friends that Charlie Adelson had a very unusual practice of keeping his money in these $1,000.
Okay, stapled. Okay, I'm going to move forward, scooch forward. He staples his money. They talk about Donna washing her money. But I want to get to a key part, or we're just not going to get through this today.
Into the trunk of her car. Magbanois says several things about the money stood out to her. She said it was stapled together in stacks of $100 bills and that it was damp like wet. She then delivered the money to Garcia and Rivera afterwards. When Catherine Magbanois said that when she asked Charlie Adelson about the money being damp.
Thank you, Tater. Thank you, Deb H. has been a member for 11 months. Thank you for being a member, Deb H. I appreciate it. You supporting the channel.
He said that his mother the defendant had actually washed the money, and that she and Charlie Adelson kind of laughed about the fact that the defendant had literally washed the money so it couldn't be traced. In Charlie Adelson's trial, Charlie Adelson took the stand, and he testified that Magbanois, Garcia, and Rivera were all in on this crime together, but that the Adelsons had nothing to do with it. They were the innocent ones.
Yep, Black Eagle. She was worried about her DNA, her fingerprints.
He crafted an elaborate story in which Garcia and Rivera came to Tallahassee on their own, killed Dan Markel without his knowledge or his family's knowledge, and then these killers colluded with Magbanois to play he and his mother for fools and extort money out of them. And for many reasons, which will be revealed to y'all in this trial, Charlie's interpretation of the facts was not reasonable to believe, and he was convicted. Charlie Adelson was convicted in November of 2023. And within hours of his guilty verdict, this defendant began to plan to flee the United States to a country that she could not be extradited from in order to avoid being arrested for Dan Markel's murder.
This is a great little short that Maestro made. And I think this sums up Donna immediately fleeing, getting tickets and looking up non-extradition countries, getting a one-way ticket to Vietnam immediately after his conviction for the murder of Dan Markel. Here is Charlie talking about if they were guilty, what they would do, and then what happened after he was convicted. Take a listen.
I know you already testified about this, but does an innocent person say if they had any evidence?
Right. Katie's saying it's the police, and I'm saying that we're innocent. They're not going to have any evidence to show we were part of something. that we were part of it. If we had any part of this, we'd be going to the airport right now. And I
Isn't
say
it
the
true,
same thing.
Doctor, that they're not going to have any evidence because you were careful?
No, because we weren't a part of this.
You were smart.
No, we weren't a part of this.
You walled yourself off
I
from
was
the
sure
killers.
they're not going to have evidence to show I did something I didn't do. So we're not running to the airport.
You're untouchable, right?
Donna Adelson was arrested right here at Miami International Airport on the jetway as she was getting ready to board a one-way flight to Vietnam. That's a country without extradition to the United States. Now she's in custody in Miami, waiting to be transferred to Tallahassee.
So if we were guilty, we'd be going to the airport. Guess where Donna was arrested?
The defendant on her phone researched countries that did not have extradition treaties with the United States, and she applied for an emergency visa to Vietnam. She was overheard planning to put her money in trust for her.
So for those listening on podcast, that was just, they showed just a little.
By Manoa to play he and his mother for fools and extort money out.
That was her saying, "Hey Daisy, can you get me a ticket to Vietnam? I need a ticket. I need to fill out this visa."
By Manoa to play he and his mother for fools. In this trial. They said Donna Adelson promised them money.
Oh, here we go. So here she was. Let me go back. I'm sorry. This is actually a really good part of the opening.
Boarding her one-way flight to Vietnam, and she was then charged for her participation in the murder of Dan Markel. After the defendant was charged, law enforcement received information from women who said that the defendant, Donna Adelson, was offering them bribes in exchange for false testimony in this trial. They said Donna Adelson promised them.
What did she promise them? Let's take a listen.
Money, housing, veneers, prescription drugs.
Prescription drugs and veneers, housing, money. She did offer money. But veneers, I'll get you veneers. They'll even write you a script. You won't have to do anything. Just say it. Just get up there and say, Katie said that she was extorting the Adelson family. And that's Adelson, not Adelson, Adelson family.
If they were willing to testify that Catherine Magbanua told them a completely different story about the crime than the one that she would be testifying to. One informant was even able to show law enforcement a script, a question and answer session for a direct examination and trial that Donna Adelson herself wrote.
Okay, what does that script say? Okay, question. Why did you speak to her? Her, meaning me, Donna Adelson, Mrs. Adelson. Why did you speak to her, Mrs. Adelson? Answer. I knew I had information and I tried many times. Oh, wait. Hold on one second. It's really hard to read. I knew I had information relevant, related to K, something like that. And I tried many times. I knew I had information related to K from the, I knew I had information relevant from K from the many times I had Been with her in jail. I think it says something like that. Been with her in jail. Been with her in jail. Question. What did you tell her? I apprehended her. That's what Donna wants one of these jailhouse informants to say. I apprehended her. I apprehended her. Told her I had some information about Kay, and did she want to hear it? And she said yes. I told her that Kay told me that Kay told Charlie on the night of the murder that some friends of hers went to Tallahassee, and she said, and she asked him to give her the money. Okay, hold on. It's really hard to read. To give her the that was going to give her $1/3 of $1 million that he was going to pay. And he could going to pay so her sister could relocate with her children to Miami. He went crazy on her. Okay. So I don't know. That was a little, okay. So what did you tell her? I apprehended her, told her I had some information about Kay, and did she want to hear it? She said yes. I told her that Kay told me that that Kay told Charlie on the night of the murder that some friends of hers went to Tallahassee on the night of the murder, and she would asked him to give her the money at $1/3 of $1 million that he was going to pay her sister's ex to relocate, something like that, with her to Miami. He went crazy on her. Okay, what jury would believe that nonsense? I apprehended her. Can you imagine these people saying I apprehended her? Let me just say, do they look like apprehended is in their I apprehended her? Does that look like it's in Drina Bernhardt's vocabulary? Or Patricia Bird? I don't know if they're using the word apprehended, but maybe she's a method writer and she's writing from what she hears in jail, but I doubt it. It is the most wooden, ridiculous dialogue you have ever heard in your life.
And that Donna Adelson wanted this informant to memorize and come into court and perjure herself by reciting it to you here in trial. Please listen to all of the evidence that y'all are going to see and hear in this trial. I know it's been a long week already, and we have a lot of evidence for you in this case, but when you do, you will see that this defendant conspired with her son, Charlie Adelson, who solicited his girlfriend, Catherine McBanois, to get this murder done. And then this defendant paid her with cash, with checks for the job once it was completed. The defendant acted in furtherance of this murder plot that went beyond just thinking about it or just talking about it. And these acts make her guilty as a principal to first-degree murder, just as if she was the one pulling the trigger in the garage herself. And while the defendant's choices helped solve a problem within her family, they came at a very high price. She took the life of a loving father of 2 little boys and caused a lifetime of grief for Dan Markel's loved ones. And at the conclusion of the evidence in this case, you will be convinced beyond any reasonable doubt that this defendant is guilty. And at that point, we'll ask you for the only verdict that does justice in this case, which is a verdict that this defendant is guilty as charged. Thank you.
Okay, there's a picture of Dan Markell at the end. But Jackie Fulford wants to take that victim moniker. I just want to show you one last thing. This happened right after testimony, before lunch, that went into some of the graphic details of the murder. And this is what Judge Everett said. Donna was pretending to cry with tears. He had been watching her behavior through the morning of first day of the trial. And here's what Judge Everett says. Take a listen.
Break this afternoon.
I'm sorry that I didn't have time to fix. I fixed the audio on the openings, but this is low. So there is CC captioning. Take a listen. Turn it up if you can, and I'll try to move away from my mic so you won't blast out your eardrums.
I believe this merits a small bit of discussion on the topic. The matters that we've discussed at sidebar concerning emotional responses, I do feel it is important at this point. Mrs. Adelson, when the testimony is occurring or the evidence, I know you may have a natural reaction, but as best possible, you need to control your reactions concerning any head movements, any expressions of disagreement, or any emotional outbursts. The jury must decide this matter on the merits, on the evidence. Do you understand this?
Yes, Your Honor, but I'm working on my trembling bottom lip. How am I supposed to get good on the trembling bottom lip if I don't practice? I can't practice in Leon County. You know the conditions there. I have a terrible mattress. I can't sleep. I can only practice in here in front of the jury. My satty face and my trembling bottom lip, Judge Everett.
Very well. I do not wish to do this in front of the jurors at all, but it's very important that you are.
Now I'm working on my poor old lady face. Is it working on you? Do you feel sad for me, Judge Everett? A little bit? A little sad?
Able to control your emotions. Do you understand what I'm saying? Does either party need to be heard before we before we go into the lunch break? No, Your Honor. Right. Please report back at 1:15 as well. I believe we have 3 other witnesses that we can possibly.
So that's Judge Everett saying, look, I'm trying to tell your lawyers on sidebar not to embarrass you. But since it's not working, since my message is not getting through to you through your lawyers to stop this manipulation of the jury, I'm going to tell you direct and embarrass you because it's not stopping. The head shaking isn't stopping. Now we have the fake crying. This case is going to be decided on the merits of the case and how the jury views the evidence, not on your satty face and your fake tears, Donna Adelson. And we'll go over it this weekend, but Judge Everett also got into it with Donna Adelson's lawyers, very ticked off. Their technique seems to be to object to everything. And Judge Everett, even to things that were already ruled on. And to just not, very tenacious and eventually pretty effective with those, whatever you want to say. They're not likable, but effective with their objections. Many of them got sustained and made it very difficult for Georgia Cappleman to stay on track. And so they're working. So one of their techniques, I think, is to get Georgia Cappleman out of her rhythm. But she's a hard person to break. She's always cool as a cucumber. But she was working on the fly. They said that I'll go into it this weekend. We'll talk about it, how exactly they did it. but it was a pretty slick maneuver by the defense. Hold on one sec. My boyfriend calls Georgia Kappelman Georgia Catwoman. So that's how he thought her name was when he first heard it. No, it's Kappelman. All right. So I'm going to end this episode the way I end so many of these episodes. This is a short victim impact statement. This was written June 21st, 2022 in Catherine McManawa's trial. Starts out, Judge Wheeler. I write to share the impacts of Dan Markel's life and murder on me. His children and mine are the same ages, and we would attend the same Tallahassee Jewish community events. If there was something to celebrate, Dan was there with Benjamin and Lincoln. He brought an infectious energy for observing the passages of life, fully present in mind and spirit. He showed up in joyful moments and times of sorrow, modeling for his sons and for the rest of us too, what it means to live a life oriented towards reverence, thoughtfulness, and justice. And while he did so, a woman he had never met, Catherine McManawa, was quietly plotting how to kill him. I observed the unmistakable value his life brought to the communities he chose, and have seen the devastation his murder delivered just the same. I witnessed up close the heartbreaking grief of some of those closest to him, whose sense of loss is profound and lasting. There is a missing space where Dan, Benjamin, and Lincoln once joined in. Dan had so much left to create and give. Uncountable lives have been forever changed for this selfish, terrible act. Respectfully, Karen Cyphers. That's what I have for today, guys. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this episode, leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought was the most powerful part of Sarah Dugan's opening, and let me know how you felt about Donna's lawyer, Jackie Fulford's opening. So much more to discuss. Luis Rivera's testimony, very different than before. I have a theory on why. I'll let you know this weekend. Also, very aggressive objecting from the defense and Judge Everett's anger. Georgia Kappelman works on the fly. Was it effective, or did she get pushed out of her rhythm? Let's talk about it this weekend. Let me know what you think in the comments, and more tomorrow and Sunday. I'll see you as always at 6 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks so much for listening and watching with me. See you back here tomorrow at 6.
What a stitch you're in. You plotted a murder 'cause you wanted to raise your daughter's kid. Tallahassee is just a stop on the way to civilization. Miami is where all the fancy people are. The TV is about 5. You can't get away from that. Two-toe, tay-toe, hoo-ho, you know the guy you pay, and you can't get away from that. Oh, Donna, what a stitch you're in. You thought jail was the little people, but now you're sold. Blankets with the locked up crew. You're a grandmother in lockdown, and your one-way ride to freedom you blew. Oh, Donna, what a stitch you're in. Your family are exiled from the social circles you swam in. We all know you never made that banana bread or offered to babysit for Dan, but you'll soon be making license plates and thinking about what could have been. Oh, Donna, you had to plan a